has won the right to rest peacefully in Texas waters.
Howdy and hello, I'm Travis Davis, Vice President of Ship Operations for Battleship Texas Foundation.
Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, Curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. That's something that's cool to mention. New Jersey has her 40mm guns removed in 67, 68 when she's being reactivated for Vietnam. But the other three Iowas still have their gun mounts on board under these aluminum igloos while they're in mothballs all the way up until they're reactivated in the 80s. So when New Jersey's are removed, there's still some of these in service around the world. We have no idea where hers go. But when the other Iowas are reactivated, people always talk about how we take parts from the already museum ships to reactivate the Iowas. But also, some of the parts that are removed from the Iowas during their reactivation find their way to the other museum ships.
Exactly. So we don't. This mount and then one other mount is from Missouri. I'm pretty sure that all the Mark 51 directors, because the Navy by the 80s really didn't need Mark 51 gun directors. So I'm pretty sure that all of these came from those ships as well. So it's really interesting. You know, we were talking about the barrels making the round robin, right? And being regunned on different ships. It's the same thing. It's the same thing paying forward, right?
How about the 3-inch guns?
So the 3-inch guns are really weird. So in 48, or really 46, the Navy removed most of, well, the entire anti-aircraft battery. Okay. So all 44 20mm mounts, all 10 40 mounts, all 10 of the 3-inch 50 mounts. Mm-hmm. In 48, when the ship was coming from, right before the ship came from Norfolk to Houston, the Navy put on the 10 3-inch 50 mounts that we have now, and 8 20mm mounts and 4 1.1 mounts, just to give a kind of representative feel of the anti-aircraft battery on the ship. Why they pulled some of the 20s off and the 3-inch is probably because they could reuse them. Same with the 40s, either on new construction or on smaller ships. Because like the 3-inch 50s were still being used in Vietnam, right, on riverine craft. Yeah. So the anyways, so we got these weird 3-inch 50s. I'm not even sure if they ever ended up on a ship. The mounts themselves were made in 1941 by the Mill, 1940, 1941, and 1942 by the Mill Printing Press Company in Chicago. So again, that whole kind of World War II ramp up, right? To everyone, that big war effort coming, the arsenal of democracy coming into play. So you got a printing press company that's building gun mounts, and then, but the guns themselves are, most of them, at least the ones that we've unsleeved and actually found their stampings, because on those guns there's not any stampings around the breech like there is on the 5-inch guns or on the 14s or the 16s. They're actually under the sleeve in a really weird spot. And it surprised us with the first gun that we removed from the sleeve and saw, like, there's a stamping, and all of those guns date back to World War I. The first two that we pulled were 1918 and 1919. One was made by the General Ordnance Company, in Connecticut, which was in the old Driggs Schroeder plant. And then the second one we pulled was made by Savage Arms, and it was made in Pennsylvania. So,
I think it's worth pointing out that your contract with the Navy is considerably different because it was 50 years older than ours. But our contract with the Navy specifically says that they can remove anything they need from the ship, but that they will make an honest attempt to replace it with something similar. So that sounds like they take your original director-controlled 3-inch guns and replace them with...
Absolutely. One of the neat things, about being the first fully donated museum ship is a project I did last summer. I went to the state archives and pulled the correspondence from the governor at the time to see, okay, what was the genesis of the ship coming here? Because you hear all the mythos, right? Yeah. So it was trying to figure out what the impetus was, and the first mention that I could find, the easy mention I could find, was a letter from Secretary of the Navy Forrestal to the governor saying, hey, this representative from Houston mentioned to me that Texas might be interested in the ship, and it took like 3 months for him to respond, but finally was like, yes. But in that first letter, SecNav Forrestal lays out every guiding principle that would be in the ship donations program. Like the Navy bears no financial obligation. You have to fully support all of this, and represent the Navy well, and all of these things was in that initial letter, and it was really, really surprising to me. And it's like, ooh, that's kind of neat to see.
This new thing that has really never happened before, which is the government turning over a former warship to be a museum permanently, and James Forrestal has already thought through all the major guiding principles that are in our contract here that's signed in 2001. Wow.
And that was that was actually, that letter was dated early November 1945. No, October 1945.
So the war is just over, and it's still like 3 years before the ship will actually be turned over to the state.
So part of that issue is the condition that the ship was in at the time. I mean, she was a worn-out warship. I mean,
back-to-back World War champion.
Two-time. Yeah. But that, and it was also, there was no legal mechanisms. So the state didn't have a mechanism for receiving the ship, and it was also, who's going to run the ship. The state had to figure out that, and then the Navy figured out, oh crap, there's no law that allows us to do this. So both the state legislature and the federal legislature both had to go through the whole legislative process to create laws to allow this to happen, and that you got two independent legislative bodies to come to, and to make something happen within 3 years is pretty amazing to me. I mean, the Navy, for the most part, until the JAG lawyers got involved, or the Department of Navy lawyers got involved, was pretty much ready to give the ship to the state in February of '46, as the ship was coming from the West Coast. In fact, I've seen preliminary orders for a repair ship to meet it in the canal zone for them to do some light work, remove some stuff, and then basically just take the ship to Houston.
Let's wash our hands of it, save some money, and just go.
Exactly. So, but that didn't happen. The ship ended up in Norfolk, going through kind of a mothball process, though she was still in commission, a reserve commission, and she sat in reserve at Hawkins Point in Baltimore, with Idaho and Ranger for most of that time, until they both got pulled out before Texas did.
And this is the time period when the original guns are being pulled off and they're replacing them with whatever was lying around.
So before, during that layup period in '46, or like the late spring of '46, that's when all these guns were coming off. So even before the ship left Norfolk to go to Hawkins Point, that was being done. So the other things we're doing, obviously, we're going to restore all these guns here that are around us. By far, the 40 millimeter guns take the most time. We take every gun mount and break it down, no matter what it is, whether it's a 20 millimeter, a 40 millimeter, a 5-inch mount. We break it all the way down into the base components, all the way down to the training bearings, and build everything back up so that we know that everything is good for the next 80 to 100 years. So even if we were to do no maintenance on them, which that's not going to happen.
We've seen how that turns out. Now we know better.
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, this whole dry dock process, right, is to address deferred maintenance. So the ship has had basically almost, I'm not good at math, that's why I'm a historian. So basically from 1948 to now, just this huge backlog of deferred maintenance. Some of it was self-inflicted by our predecessors when they were berthing the ship in San Jacinto, but others it was just lack of resources to do the work necessary and to keep up with what was there. Our plan going forward with all these gun mounts is we're standing up within our volunteer corps, and even our staff, is just dedicated gun crews. So we may have a half dozen gun crews that all they're doing is just, they come out once a month or twice a month and they go through a mount, make sure all the lube points are being lubed, and there's no corrosion starting to build up, and then just address it. So, and before it gets out of hand.
Right, at the start of this process, none of you guys had ever taken one of these apart before, right?
Well, funny thing is, we have, but not to this extent. So there were definitely some new issues that we had to learn through. So to work through and learn. But you know, the process. Someone asked on social media, is like, how did you even know how to do this? I mean, and it was basically, we started with the guns that were relatively easy to work with, that we had manuals for, and then you start building up a base of skill sets on how to go through this. And of course, we're guided by our basic, you know, preservation principles, which first, do no harm, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, obviously looking at the long term, what is best for the long term life of the project. You know, sometimes you do have to do a little harm to improve the life of the ship or the object. So like breaking bolts off that you know, that won't come loose. You know, you snap them off. Okay, great. We have to drill out a 1945 bolt and then put a new bolt in. You know, things like that. I mean, but obviously we're not making these things something that they're not.
Right. You're replacing a steel bolt with a steel bolt. Yeah.
The only variation that we've done on that has been like with some of the parts that have to be functional, that have to be exposed to the elements, instead of, you know, within the Navy, they would have been exposed and they've been just slopped with grease and oil or whatnot just to stay preserved as, right, you know, preservative coatings, right? What we did was we went through and nickel plated a lot of these pieces, and then we'd add you know, preservative coatings over the top of that, you know, lubricants over the top of that, particularly with the 3-inch guns. The breech blocks on the 3-inch guns. Here, let's walk over here real quick. So most of these breeches, so here's the breech block here, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a vertical sliding breech block. We're like on your 5-inch guns, my 5-inch guns, our main batteries, you know, they're interrupted thread, you know, or breech blocks. So, but this one's vertical sliding, and you can see all the rust that is accumulated in here. So, and then that causes the breech to have just broken down from corrosion, like I showed you earlier.
Yeah.
And but by plating all of this, it prevents that from happening. Thank you guys for watching our video. Thanks to the New Jersey crew coming down and hang out with us for a little bit so we can show them what we're doing and the ship in the shipyard. We want to thank all of you for watching and liking and supporting our videos. Thank you for all your support. And you can follow us on not only this channel, but our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And our TikTok.